Hello and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Munoz. This is part of my special 29 Days of Magic series where I interview an amazing Black woman every single day for 29 straight days for Black History Month. And today's episode, I'm delighted to have Gretchen Bellamy, who is an amazing consultant in change management. She has a fantastic story, and I can't wait for you all to take a listen. Hey, Gretchen.
Hey, how are you?
I know, causing trouble, interviewing people, huge, the huge.
The huge.
A thing I do in February. So I'm so delighted to have you on the podcast. First question is always hilarious in terms of what people come up with, and I'm sure yours will be no different. So, Gretchen, what was your first job?
My first job was when I was 12 years old, and I was a paper girl.
Wow.
Yes.
You gotta share the story because isn't being working at 12 illegal?
I have apparently not in Pennsylvania in the 80s, but yeah, I wanted to make a little extra cash. The gentleman's name who hired me, he actually came to our house, our apartment. Jim Best was his name. And I guess I impressed him enough at 12 that he felt they could put out some newspapers and I could pick them up at 4 a.m. and deliver them in the steepest apartment complex in Whitehall, Pennsylvania. So I did that for, I don't know, 6 months. Hardest part was collecting the money. So that was my first job.
Wait a minute. So you were climbing steps with like a satchel full of newspapers at 12, and then
Yeah.
being like, so hey, Miss Thompson, here's your paper, and please give me $5.
Yeah, yeah. It was probably less money than that. Like $1. But yeah, so they were I actually had a cart that I would push and my sister and I would ride it sometimes. It was really fun, like almost like a box car. And then I would climb the steps. So it was 2 to 3 story apartments, and I would drop the paper. And then we'd go collect once a month. And I recall one time where my sister, she was roller skating, and this was an extremely steep hill and a really long hill just with parking lots off of it. She fell and cut her knee open. And trying to find someone in the neighborhood who would help was really challenging. But we did get a band-aid for her eventually. But yeah, it was kind of scary because you're going to people's houses and asking them for money that they don't want to give up.
Yeah. Okay, so this tells me someone on this call is fearless, even from a young age. Like, good God.
Looking back, I'm like, wow, that was crazy.
I mean, like that you could not do that today. Literally, you could
Oh
not.
no, I will not go to anybody's house. So
Like, oh my God. That, like I said, tells me that already you were fearless from jump. Okay.
yeah.
So after realizing that, you can knock on people's doors and actually shake them down for money that they that they owed to where we are now, what has that career journey been like?
Sure. Well, I'll tell it as quickly as possible. It starts in 1871 when my grandfather was born in rural North Carolina. My dad is one of 23 and I'm one of 28. And
Whoa.
I know, trying to repopulate the world.
One Bellamy at a time. Okay.
One Bellamy at a time. So I am the eighth from the end. I'm the first to go to college and go on to graduate or professional school. I'm a lawyer. I went to Duke Law, but the year that I graduated with my college degree, my dad got his GED because he had been told that Black people don't go to college. And so he didn't. He worked 3 jobs, had all the children in the world, and that's that. And so I have been a Peace Corps volunteer. I did that after I studied abroad and saw some of the worst poverty I've seen. And that's not to diminish what's here. I then came back and worked at a homeless shelter and did that for 5 years. Then I went to law school. I did 2 law degrees, a JD and an LLM in international and comparative law. And while I'd been in Peace Corps, I was in Cameroon, which is in Central Africa. And I decided that I wanted to go back. And so I went to Zimbabwe for 4.5 months to study children's rights and child protection. Then I went and studied at the University of Nairobi. And I'd also done 2 summers at a big law firm in New York City and knew that that was not the life I wanted for my family. I was married and recently pregnant for my 3rd year of law school. And so I turned that offer down But a professor saw me and said, "Hey, would you like to start a law journal with me?" and called Legal Strategy. And I did. And it turns out he was one of the top special masters. So when you think of like the 9/11 Commission and that Ken Feinberg was Francis McGovern's best friend. And so I started writing law review articles and ended up working with him for several years, figuring out how to equitably distribute money in the largest securities class action settlement. Then went on, worked with a law firm for about 2 years, doing securities law, but was found that very niche. So I joined the American Bar Association section of international law, became the chair of the Africa Committee, won some awards for the work we were doing, ended up being the diversity officer. And while I was a diversity officer for that section, I switched careers, switched places where I was working, and became the director of international pro bono and public interest at the University of Miami School of Law, where I was helping students find jobs abroad or internships and that sort. But I also created something called the African Probate and Policy Initiative. And I took 4 law students and my son, who was 7 at the time, to Tanzania to draft wills for marginalized men and women across the country. So we did, it was about 115 wills, over 300 hours of pro bono service. I got my emails that came in were very sporadic, and I just said yes to everything before I learned how to say no. And I said yes to moderating a presidential showcase panel for the ABA's annual meeting. And so a few weeks after I got back, I was in front of 500 people moderating the presidential showcase for about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It included the general counsel of Clorox, Laura Stein, Joe West, who was at the Minority Corporate Counsel Association, and a number of other attorneys. And almost immediately I got 2 job offers, one from the MCAA and one from Walmart, to be assistant general counsel in charge of global diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I accepted and moved from Miami to Bentonville, Arkansas. And there I worked on a lot of projects, the one of which I was most proud, or I am most proud, is from the CEO's desk came the charge of creating a truly global legal department, whatever that meant, right? So I worked with a professor at the University of Oklahoma and created a survey that I deployed in 4 countries. So Costa Rica, Mexico, Argentina, and Chile. Went to visit each one of those countries to provide the results, but also understand what diversity meant in each of those countries and what it looked like for the legal profession. And ultimately decided that we needed to diversify our outside counsel as well as help our internal colleagues. So internally, they had all sorts of, they had language training, but then skills training. And externally, I partnered with 2 different law schools. And that was because I was told that the reason there were not one minority in Chile working for a large firm was because they didn't speak English and they did not have table manners. Now, this is a direct quote. And so I decided I was going to fix that. And I did, using socioeconomics status as a means to find the minorities who could benefit from the assistance of the company. And so I created that, where they would get English for 3 years. And then they also would have an externship or internship with a guaranteed job at the end. And that was pretty revolutionary. And then I was promoted. I became a senior strategist in the global office for culture, diversity, and inclusion, working on like, how do you identify challenged managers and how demographics kind of play into that? And how do we rehabilitate them or exit them from the company? However, I was receiving death threats. It's a very challenging time because I was fighting for equality in my son's school. So I ended up moving back to North Carolina and working at UNC Chapel Hill. And I arrived 2 months before Silence Dam was torn down. And I left about a month before Nicole Hannibal Jones blew up. It was a very challenging time. Ended up going to McDonald's and working there as the first senior director for international DEI. So I had 118 markets for which I was responsible. But really the challenge was understanding what diversity, equity, and inclusion meant in those countries. So I developed a 3-tier process to assess countries and companies. And then once I left there, I went and worked with a startup called Class Rebel. Education, as you may have kind of gleaned, is very important to me.
A little.
A little. So I worked with worked with a startup called Class Rebel. And the idea behind that is really to bring education close and affordable to people so they don't have to go pay for an MBA. So if you want to learn about angel investing, you paid $99 and you have lifetime access to this program whenever it's live, or to go back and watch any recording. And so then, as that, I still am an instructor for them. I teach business resiliency from a DEI lens. And now I just finished working with Piedmont Health Services, which was the first community-based health center or federally qualified health center. They terminated their DEI program, which is kind of sad because that's the point of community-based health, is to help the most underrepresented and underserved. But yeah, and so I'm continuing. I've always been a consultant, at least for the last 7 years. So that's what I'm doing now.
Oh my
Ooh.
God. Breathe. Oh my. I'm like, okay, which Gretchen do I want to talk about first? Like, I did. Well, we might as well just hit the elephant in the room. So obviously, a lot of your work has been centered on DEI. And
Mm-hmm.
what I really loved about you going through your unbelievably impressive resume was that how every place that you went, you showed that with diversity and inclusion, you got a better outcome.
Yes.
And I think that that is this it's the clearest example of why what's currently happening is a bunch of foolishness.
Yeah, truly. Thank you. And I mean, I hate to have to say thank you, but that's, yeah.
It is astonishing to me how we let mediocrity be the norm when it
Yeah.
comes from white men versus literally you are again an example of like, hello, you want someone who knows what they're doing? Here.
Right.
Period, full stop. And why it's so important from from a global perspective. It's like
Mm-hmm.
ultimately the world is getting browner.
Thank you. Yes. Say it again.
Like, and anyone who tells you it's not is just lying because they're trying to hold on with their cold dead white hands
Mm-mm.
on everything. It doesn't matter. You're not gonna baby make your way out of that changing.
Well, they kind of, no, they're in fact ushering it in with all of the anti-abortion policies. I'm like, okay,
It's not
you
gonna
know,
happen though. It's not gonna happen. The
right,
co-hangers still exist, which is a terrible
right,
thing to say, but like if people don't want to have a baby, they're not gonna have a baby.
right.
And
I,
it's terrifying.
it's,
And I'm sure for you it's ridiculous and heartbreaking. But
yeah.
I think my question to you is in the sea of all of the amazing things that you've done, what are you the proudest of?
Well, we haven't talked about hobbies yet, but I
Uh,
will say the
there's more?
proudest,
Oh God.
uh,
I love
the
it. I love it.
career wise, I would say the thing that I'm proudest of is that program in Chile because it was sustainable and replicable, right? And you, once you understand, I did those surveys and all the interviewing in those 4 countries and decided on Chile. Oh, I said I could say gay out loud and have a conversation about what it means to be in the LGBT community. Now, I'm not a member of the community, I'm an ally, but I knew when I could have that conversation that that was a society that was ready to make a change, and me going in there and saying, okay, let's identify different ways of finding people who've been underserved or who have been marginalized, I could do it. As opposed to Argentina, where it was, women don't want to work here. That was the quote that I was given. Or in Mexico, where it was really like this Teflon, like see-through Teflon mask. They were like, we don't see color here. Really challenged places. But in Chile, I was able to do that. And the whole program cost $25,000. So, and it's actually open source right now. You can go find the how to do it, the blueprint. You just don't get me, right? Unless you hire me to help you. But the blueprint is there on how to do it. I don't want to be the kind of gatekeeper of information like that. Yeah. So that's the thing that I'm most proud of as a professional.
Yeah, I mean, and that's incredible because it's like the lasting impact that you make on when you build programs like that. Like there are people who get jobs now, period, full stop.
Right.
And
Very,
and when
yes.
folks get jobs, That helps the economy. The economy grows, and then that helps neighborhoods be more prosperous, which reduces crimes, which helps with health benefit, with health outcomes. Like there's this whole sea of things that happen once
Yes.
you realize that the world is diverse and you give people the tools to thrive as opposed to take those tools away.
Yes. Yeah. I don't speak Spanish fluently. And so I was listening because we had there was 300 people there as we launched the program. And there was a gentleman there. It was pretty dark and no lawyer. He was the number one peer reviewed like attorney, criminal defense attorney in the country as voted by his colleagues. But no, he never admitted he was Mapuche. So which is the largest indigenous group in Chile. And as I'm hearing the translation, all of a sudden it gets, I can't hear it as well because the room just erupts. And what I hear was, well, I am Mapuche, which is the first time that someone admitted it publicly, right? A person of stature and prominence.
Right.
And that was revolutionary. Like that was one of, the moment, even now, it's how many, 10 years later, thinking about it gives me chills because it really did change Chile. So yeah, those are the things that I hold on to because it's hard knowing that the last 4 places that I worked, all of them have abandoned diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I don't understand what you think is going to happen. That like suddenly everyone's gonna go under a rock.
Right.
I don't like. Also, there's this thing called the internet, which is
Right.
forever.
There's
And
the internet and there are people like, I mean, like you said, the world is browning. And like at the end of the day, all of these companies, right, regardless of their business status, right, for profit, nonprofit, doesn't really matter. Like they all are seeking customers, consumers, clients, and you need to understand who your client base or your consumer base is, right? And people do have choices. And while they may not fear a gigantic boycott, there are consequences that do come from those things, right? We've seen companies, I mean, how many have made faux pas where they're apologizing and maybe they don't want to apologize right now, but they will. That apology will come one way or another. So, yeah, but
exactly.
it's hard.
It is. I mean, yeah, I feel like, I've never been an employee in the world of DEI. I've always been a marketing executive and all. But obviously, I'm the black lady who's in the room with mostly white folks. And, what I always said was like, do you like money?
Right.
So if you like money, you need to like pay attention to the world around you. This is not complicated. Like,
Right.
like purely capitalistic reasons for doing these sorts of things. If you are good to like, if you think about inclusion, inclusion means include. When you include more people, you include more money in your pockets.
Exactly.
That's literally all this is. And when you exclude people, you exclude more money from your pockets. Which is it do you want? Uh,
Right.
and and you look at like, oh well, these billionaires, blah 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 blah. Yeah, that's them. That's
Mhm.
not you. There's 200 of them. There's billions of others.
Right.
So if you're playing to the whims of one guy because you somehow think that's going to make you money, that is stupid.
I'm like, he's not buying his toilet paper from you. Let's just be clear. He's not
Like,
buying his clothing from you.
not buying it.
Right.
Not buying your 14 pack of toilet paper. You know who is? Gretchen.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and if you keep ticking those people off, they're going to find somewhere at Costco to go and buy.
Yeah, I know. At Costco, I see you. Yeah.
Like it just isn't. I mean, I said I don't know why, and I think everyone's really exhausted because of all of this. And it's been, like we said, like we're in early February, and the last 30 some odd days have been just nonstop flood of foolishness and terror and heartbreak and sadness, and it's a lot for people to see. But the fundamental issue that no one is yelling from the rooftops is like, you're going to lose money.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
I think about it, like, and I think this is why, like, it's so challenging. I don't want to do, unconscious bias training. I talked with the Dr. Banaji who created the Harvard Implicit Bias Test, right, platform. And she said to me when we had breakfast, she's like, well, Gretchen, I fear what I will have unleashed into the world, right? So everyone thinks it's unconscious bias training. I'm like, no, we need to think about it from risk perspective I was a securities attorney, right? Writing the risk factors for the SEC documents that companies have to report. And I'm like, what are the risks to your business, right? Think about the marketing is a huge one, right? If you don't have the right people in the room, you make a faux pas, all of a sudden nobody wants to buy, you're being boycotted, right? You need to have the right people in the room and they need to understand your company. And I think part of the challenge is that people are there for such short periods of time, and this is a very selfish time. Not to say that other time periods haven't been, but this, like, the individual personal selfishness, I think, is causing a lot of pain and heartache. So this one man feels like he knows better than all of us, because why? Because he had his name put on PayPal, right? Like, he didn't found anything.
He didn't found he is the ultimate colonizer.
Oh, right. He is, isn't he?
Yeah. Like you didn't find anything that was already there. You just stuck your name on it. And
Yeah.
you wrote
Yeah.
the name of it all.
Mm-mm.
But also he's a big baby.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
and it's sort of like I was a nerdy kid in school. I was bullied. I'm sure lots of
Mhm.
other kids were. My response was not let me try and turn into Lex Luthor.
Right. No, it wasn't.
No, my response was like, how do I, it made me more empathetic to other folks and
Yeah.
understanding that, like, when I'm in those rooms now, I want everyone to feel welcome versus that side of the universe. But, I live in hope because the world is getting browner.
Hmm.
And ultimately, that's a freight train that is not going off a track. Like, it isn't. Like, there, so I'm hopeful that we will find a way to, eke out wins here, eke out wins there until we get to a better place. Because if we don't have any hope, then
Right.
it'll be terrible. Speaking of which, in terms of hope,
Mhm.
what do you think you tell your 18-year-old Gretchen?
Well, my son is 19, so
All right, here we go.
what I say every day. So, having a young Black son is challenging. When he was getting ready to drive, I mean, it was a couple of years. I had him in a private school in Arkansas. And I thought, oh goodness, I can, when he gets ready to drive, I'll just put the logo of the school, so people know, like, this is a good kid. And then I thought, well, maybe they'll think he stole the car, right? Because he was like one of a very few Black children in that school. And so what I always tell my son, one thing is keep your wits about you. And right now he has a 3.85. He's at a small liberal arts college. He wants to play professional basketball and he works at it. And I think that all of the things that he's seen, like these, I gave you my career, but like my son was with me that whole time. I had him, but right at my finals, my third year of law school. So he's been with me my entire career. And he what he's seen, and he actually said, because my birthday was last week, he said, this beautiful message about how I inspire him because I never give up. And it's the same for him. He's now working for Move for Hunger as an intern, as a freshman, doing data science and economics. And he really wants to understand how to use data, AI, all of those things to make the world better. And that is my gift to the world. I continue to have those conversations, those very open, raw conversations when it feels scary. I mean, his father works for USAID. Need I say more? Like, it is, it seems like the world is falling on us.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah. So it's really hard, but he knows, like, his father nor I have ever given up. It might seem like we're down, that part in the movie where the good guys, first they're
Yeah.
up and then they start, that's like, we might be down there right now, but that means we're just regathering and regrouping our strength. That's what I would say to him. And that's what I would say to any other child who feels afraid.
Wow, you're in all of it. Yeah, I look, ultimately Thanos doesn't win. Like we all
Thanos doesn't win.
doesn't win.
Yeah.
Like, so that, it's part of the reason I like to watch Marvel movies, honestly.
Yes.
It's like at the end of the day, the good guy does win. It goes through some horrible things do happen, and they're oftentimes very bad.
Yeah.
But in the end, the good guys do end up winning. Uh,
Yes.
it takes 9, 10, 20 movies to get there. But
Yeah. Takes you a while, right? You gotta kind of sometimes veer out into the Hulk and
but it ends up to smarter innovation. It leads to
Yes.
better communities problem solving. Someone who you didn't expect ends up being the person who ends up leading the day. Like it is sort of similar in that vein that like, being consistent and never giving up, but also the importance of having a worldview and not just it
Mhm.
being so American centric is so important because once you see what the rest of the world looks like, again, it helps change your view on like, oh, we're globally interconnected, not just
Yes.
in one city.
Yeah. And I think that's the also part of what we were able to give our son is that global perspective. I mean, he went with me on almost every business trip I had. He flew to Congo to visit his dad when he was stationed there, flew by himself. Like he's been
Wow.
a lot of places, and that really does impact who he is deeply and the way that he carries himself, even in a very conservative part of Pennsylvania where he is currently. So the worldview, and then also thinking if we go back to Marvel movies, which I very much appreciate you bringing up, is like, you see over time too, right? Starting with Captain America. I mean, it's like, the early 1900s. Hydra, there's always a head to Hydra, right? We can't cut them all off, but we can get better and more savvy and quicker to cut them off, right? And stop them. And I'm hoping that now, I mean, we're repeating history again. I'm hoping that we can like use those lessons and find a way. Um, I'm hopeful for that.
I do love that you love Marvel movies too. I knew I'd like them. Uh,
Love them.
I actually, interestingly, I was on a plane recently and I was watching Marvel Winter Soldier, which
Mhm.
is, probably one of the best of them all.
Agreed.
Uh,
Agreed.
Lucky.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes,
And look, see, he ends up, finding his way. And
he
who
did.
saves him? Black women.
Yes, I know.
Just I mean, it is interesting. I am actually kind of surprised no one has sort of done like the appropriate like study and like PhD dissertation on the role of Black women across the Marvel universe and what that
Ah,
like against culture and society. Because it does show you a lot.
yeah. I hope someone's inspired to do that. I would love to. I get distracted easily, but that sounds really fascinating.
I mean, it's like it is. Shuri says the line, "Oh, look, another broken white boy we have to fix."
Right,
Like
right.
in Black Panther. So
Hmm.
that, I mean, that one line. If you took that one line and put that in, culture of the
Right.
last 20 odd years, you could name 30 Black women and then go ahead and do a dissertation.
You could. You could. And there's probably more, right? The hidden figures, right? We're
All those
helping.
years, like all the folks who are behind the scenes. Like I said, I think there's a reason why Marvel, has a really interesting crossover into Black and Brown communities because there is something about the stories of the heroes.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, I would agree with you.
so I could go off, we could go off on a Marvel tangent, but that's cool.
Love it. I
Back,
love it.
back to Gretchen. So obviously, your world is a little bit volatile right now. Probably very, I'm sure, absolutely challenging. So what does Gretchen do for Gretchen? What do you do for your self-care?
So a couple of years ago, I took a DIY like home fix it class at my local community college and loved it. And so last summer I took a welding class, and this fall I took woodworking 101 and built a table and it was, oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher his name, Noguchi. I'll just say it was a Noguchi table. I had no idea that this was a very famous table design. I just was like modern table. Apparently, this man has a whole museum dedicated to him in Queens, New York. So I built this table, and my teacher's like, you really should consider doing this. But now I'm doing welding, fabrication, trying to understand how that works. And then I would love to start building things. I think having that skill and using your hand, like I said about those four jobs, right? Like, what do I have to show for that, right? Well, I do have people and people whose lives have changed, and that's wonderful. But the day to day, I don't talk to them. I don't see them. I don't know them, but I do know that I can touch my table. I can touch the things that I've welded. I can touch the things that I've forged in fire, the spoon and the pinhook. And ultimately this project that I'm gonna finish this semester with welding. And so those are the things, because I also get involved with community members. So all different people from all different backgrounds, and I get to know them. And that is exciting and offers a challenge to my brain in a way that it's not been challenged before. So yeah, that's what I do.
Amazing. I have to see his table.
Yeah, I will send you a picture. Again, it's pretty cool.
And I love that. And I think and it sort of makes sense. It's like creative pursuits, building with your hands and actually seeing what you built. There's nothing better than that. I recently went back to building Legos, something
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
was 12. And it was also kind of crazy. Like it's been almost 30 years and like, but I like literally sat down and did it in like an hour. I was like, oh wait, this is fun for me. So
Right,
like when you
right.
see the thing you build, it's oftentimes just helps so much.
The reward. I said, this is the best thing I built since my son. So, and that took me 24 hours of like, being in the shop, and I came out with a great table. So,
That's amazing. For you, do you have a give or an ask of the audience?
so if you'll indulge, I'll give both. My give is to say, keep your wits about you. It's what I said to my son and shared earlier. Read all that you can from a variety of sources, and stop when you need to stop. uh, Find ways, like tangible ways to help, right? So right now it's like calling your senators, like calling and calling and calling. And nobody wants to call these days. But that's kind of the trick, right? Like we want to sit in an online forum or be a keyboard warrior. In this case, we need to make those phone calls and do it repeatedly. And I'd say also go get out into your community. Like I was sharing about using these continuing education classes, learn something new. I had no idea I could create a table like I did.
There you go.
um, so please. And then my ask is twofold. One is, there are people who are like me. Like I felt the need to be the best at everything and work really hard. So should you find that you need someone like me who has the ability to do strategy, but really from a much higher, not the DEI lens. The DEI lens is just one, right? But who really can listen. I love listening to ideas and thinking through. I might not be an expert in physics, but I have great ideas about different products that you could create when you just stop to think, right? So providing that as diverse perspective if I dare. And also, my ask is that you be kind to somebody who is next to you, just one person, one time a week, because every single person's going through something. And like they may cut you off, take 5 deep breaths and say, it's going to be okay. Don't be walked over, but also just recognize we're all going through a lot. So that would be my other ask. Just be kinder.
Wonderful and absolutely necessary on all those fronts. And now, last question for you.
Yeah.
Where do you find your joy?
I find my joy with my son, talking to him. Like he'll tell you I'm the biggest basketball yapper there is. Like he's like, you're
Your
the best.
feelings on the AD Djokovic trade.
Oh my God. Like what were the Mavericks thinking? I don't know, but like good on them. And I can't wait to watch LeBron win another championship with Luka, because that's gonna happen.
Probably.
No, I can yap about those things. I find joy in it. I find joy. I live on an acre of land. So I built my COVID garden. I have 3 dogs, PD, Pablo, and Poe. No relation for PD, Pablo. It just turned out that way. But I find joy with them and being with my family and my friends, who most of them are my chosen family as well. So yeah, like don't forget to go visit those people. It's important.
Awesome. Oh my God, Gretchen. I feel like I could talk to you for like the next 17 hours and it would fly by. Because
Thank you.
wow. Like I said, you like Marvel movies and basketball. I mean, like, do you like cocktails?
I do like cocktails.
Okay, you have to
Yeah.
come to New York at some point. So
I was just there. That's where I was. I literally just got home on Sunday night. I was there for a week. So I'm gonna definitely have to make another trip up.
come on up. Because oh my God, like
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
need to learn about you too.
this is
So
the whole point. I can tell you all the cocktails, but
mhm.
I just want to thank you, if no one has, for all the amazing work you've done over the last decade or two.
Thank you.
Because I know you can't see it, but
Mhm.
the impact that you have clearly made has changed the lives of probably thousands of people.
Yeah.
And I think if no one has told you thank you, here you go. Thank you. You're not able to build those sorts of programs and keep going and going and going if what you're doing isn't having a real impact. And so that's just so incredibly impactful and important and necessary. And I think all the great work that you've done and continue to do will continue to help change the world. And this is why Black ladies need to be in charge. And this is also
Yeah.
why I'm doing 29 days, because like again, it's sort of crazy. Like this year especially, I think it's so important for folks to hear from voices like yours and be like, look who's out here doing all this amazing stuff. Uh,
Wow.
and you may not, because you may think of the four Black women that you've seen on TV, but like there's thousands more of us. Uh,
Right.
and so that's literally why I do this. So I can't thank you enough for taking some time today to share a little bit of your story with our audience. I'm 110% sure folks are going to find lots of amazing things to pull out of this conversation today and be hitting you up in your DMs.
Right.
'Cause we're going to put all in the comments to help find you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. It was my pleasure. And I'm so glad that we got connected. The universe conspired in a wonderful way. So thank you.
Absolutely did. And that is our show.